Good evening. Welcome to The Next Word. I'm your host, Chris Warnke, and tonight we're going to have a conversation about Serbia. I have two guests just returned from Serbia on an environmental trade mission. Mr. Jeff Camera, who is the managing partner of Regreening Organics, as well as the Deputy Secretary for the State of Maryland, Mr. Luis Borunda. And Deputy Secretary of State for the State of Maryland. Luis,
how are you, Chris?
Good. So glad because exciting times. You went to Serbia.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, it was a very interesting trip to put together, and of course you were involved in introducing us to the Minister of Environmental Protection, Goran Trivan, and we really appreciate your introduction there. And he let us know that Serbia really has some challenges in the area of environmental protection. And also the fact that the EU was interested in funding projects there in Serbia. And so we asked him if he would give Maryland companies the opportunity to bid on some of those projects. And they invited us to Serbia and really had a tremendous. It wasn't fun. There was a lot of work.
It was a lot of work,
but it was very enjoyable.
Right.
And they treated us very well, as you know. And we saw a lot of potential in Serbia, and they need a lot of help.
They need a lot of help.
And so the Maryland companies that we took with us focus on the environmental sector, and we think that there's going to be a tremendous opportunity for Maryland companies to do business internationally.
Right.
We didn't take these huge Fortune 500 companies. We took small Maryland companies with us, and we think that they will have a tremendous amount of opportunity there in Serbia to do some business.
Well, I have to tell you, and this is a tribute to you, Louise, and to the Secretary of State's office, who of course attended as well. But you've all done a good job, and there was a reason why they chose the state of Maryland as a model. Right. And the fact that they invited you to come because of what you're doing in the environmental. And of course you had your environmental Secretary of the Environment, and you had the Secretary of Natural Resources. Right. But Maryland's done a great job. And you're a terrific national model.
Maryland is a national leader.
It is.
And your audience should know that. They're a national leader in terms of environmental protection.
Yes.
Secretary of State Wobensmith is very forward-thinking and has really helped not just Serbia, but other countries understand how important these subnational relationships are. And of course, these subnational relationships are the platform that we use is Sister States, which is part of Sister Cities International. Right. And we've used that platform to engage states, provinces, counties, whatever they call that region that we call states here in the United States. We've used that platform to engage these countries. And Secretary Wobensmith looks at the sister states model as an entree point to the rest of the country. Right. And in this particular case, we were just focused on the environmental sector. And I think that gave us a lot of leverage just in terms of being very, very targeted in the kinds of companies that we took over there. And because it was so niched and so targeted, they knew exactly who to introduce us to. It wasn't this general business trade mission. It was very focused. And so...
No, you all did a terrific, you did a terrific job. And you know, when you bring companies like Jeff's, the Regreening Organics, and you know, Jeff, you did terrific job in your presentation, and so you're just one example of the kind of quality of company that the Secretary's office brought.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity for Serbia.
Oh,
we
absolutely.
did, and to the state of Maryland. From a small business, it was a great opportunity for us because we were actually able to meet, as Luis was saying, to reach out and really understand some of the needs. And I think one of the things that I found is there's a misperception, if you will, of exactly what the needs and interests are. And one of the things that I found in going through there is that a lot of the needs and a lot of the desires that they're going through and challenges that they're facing are not dissimilar to what we have faced here. But we do take a lot for granted. And there's a lot of good opportunities for collaboration, for sharing of ideas, which the state has been very supportive of, from Secretary Wovensmith to Luis to the other secretaries have been wonderful in support of us as a company. And I think for all the companies that were there, we all had a very good opportunity to meet and actually understand some of the needs, but to really share our concepts and our experiences that we had been through.
Your impressions, though, I have to say, of the people, which I think wonderful, and they're committed, and I know from what I saw, I thought the people were wonderful. And the fact that you can go on this kind of a mission and talk to people and see too and see what they're going through, and you have a great, you have a greater understanding of the challenges they're facing. And again, going back to that we're fortunate.
Well, Chris, I think the level of the way that they viewed us was absolutely remarkable. Yes. Our delegation, which included Secretary Wovensmith, Secretary of State Wovensmith, the Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources, Mark Belton, and the Secretary of Environment, Ben Grumbles. To have three secretaries travel to Serbia, and myself as the Deputy Secretary of State, that was the biggest thing to happen to them in the last 20 years probably, and that's not my assessment. That was what they told us.
Right.
So they were extremely pleased to have the attention that our delegation was able to provide, and then to bring the caliber of businesses like Jeff's to Serbia, to their front door, and show them what we're able to do was something that I think was quite unique to Serbia. It was interesting. I saw in the paper while we were there, they had this. Russia had given them 6 MiGs, and they did an air show and everything like that. So it was interesting that at a certain level of technology, they're right on par.
Right, they're on par.
But when you talk about the environment, man, that can has been kicked down the road for a long time, and they're paying for it now. But at the same time, they've got a leader there in the Ministry of Environmental Protection, which is a brand new ministry. Goran Trivan.
Right. He was incredible.
Isn't he?
Yes.
He's a leader. He's a leader of leaders.
Right. I was so impressed with his, just compassion, his passion, his commitment, to seeing things through. And you mentioned something, I know you've mentioned this throughout the whole, actually, trip. You talked about the fact that the governor of Maryland, he's always said, look, we are open for business.
Right.
And you all do a terrific job in promoting your companies. You do.
Well, Governor Hogan, that's his singular focus.
Yes.
That Maryland is open for business and making sure that Maryland is a business-friendly state.
Right.
And I think all of us, in terms of, the agency heads, the secretaries, we're all focused on that.
Right.
and figuring out how we can make our agencies business friendly. One of the first things, for example, that we did when we took office was we developed customer surveys.
Really?
Yeah,
Well, smart.
and people were kind of blown away that we wanted their opinion about how we were doing and how we could improve. And of course, the governor's customer service initiative is statewide now. Every agency has a customer service training implemented, and every employee in the state should have a little link at the bottom of their signature that asks that would lead them to a customer service evaluation form.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So we really are focused on making sure that we're delivering a high quality product to our customers, the citizens of Maryland.
Right.
And that's what Governor Hogan is focused on.
And also the citizens of globally.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you brought so many outstanding small businesses like Jeff's, is a tribute. And Jeff, we're going to get into more about what you're doing, not just certainly what you want to do, certainly worldwide, but what you're doing in our own backyard here in the state of Maryland, because I think what you have is, really quite unusual and can be a huge benefit, both economically and to the environment.
Right. One of the things that we are able to do is, as I mentioned, it doesn't matter whether it's here in the United States, in Maryland, or in Serbia, or somewhere else. The issues that we all deal with, whether it be recycling or processing of organics or technology, and how you bring all of these things together. We really all are looking at that, and that's one of the things that this delegation was able to really focus on. And with the support of the state, with the support of the secretaries that were there, really were more than just showcasing, look at this delegation. It was more of, how do you really reach out? How do you really connect?
Right.
And one of the things that was mentioned to me is, with Serbia and with some of the places that we met, people come in and say, one of the municipalities mentioned to me, people come in and say, this is what you need. But I think that really having the secretaries there to listen and to have an exchange of ideas with elected officials, with leaders, and also with companies, just to hear what are their needs first. And I think that's often left out a lot of times, where large corporations or other companies come in and say, we know what you have. And we found out, especially in Nice, is sitting there and really walking the streets and talking to them and finding out where have they been, what are they doing, what were the mistakes, what are they looking at, what's their long term, and how are they getting the buy-in of their residents.
Of the residents, right.
And that was it was very refreshing to hear, and it was also to understand what issues they're going to, and then to see if there was a way that we would potentially be able to help them.
So we're going to get into that. We just have to take a short break, and we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about that. 'Cause
Great.
you're absolutely right. So you're watching The Next Word. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Time to wake up. I've got a job to do today.
I've got a job to do today.
Don't forget, you've got a job to do today.
Hey, Mom. I got the job. Thanks.
Got the job. Welcome aboard.
Have a good first day at work, Mom.
Your donations to Goodwill fund job training programs right in your community.
Feels good to start fresh, right?
Sure does.
And like that, you're a job creator.
Welcome back. You're watching The Next Word. I'm your host, Chris Warnke. Tonight we're having a conversation about our U.S. small companies and what we can be doing worldwide, in this case, in the environmental arena. We have Jeff Camera, who is the managing partner of Regreening Organics, as well as the Deputy Secretary of State for the state of Maryland, Luis Borunda. And Jeff, you went over to Serbia with, of course, under the auspices of the Secretary of State from Maryland. And you met the Minister of Environment, who was terrific, who we've all agreed is very committed to finding solutions to some really very huge challenges that the country is facing. It's not a big country in terms of population, but it's a country that obviously has incredible needs that we as citizens can't even really fathom. And you saw it, Louise, firsthand. So from the standpoint of your company, though, I talk a little bit about where you think you could bring added value to a place like Serbia. I know what you're doing. We can go back and talk about Maryland, but in terms of a country like Serbia.
One of the things that Serbia, like most places in the world, has, our company deals in the processing of our technology for processing of organic and inorganic matter into several useful byproducts, such as energy, fertilizers, different areas, to help clean the environment. And one of the things, the issues where we can really help is when it comes to landfills. Common practice, well, we have great recycling programs here in Maryland, and we're kind of on the cutting edge of making those happen. Other places in the world where they're having to educate people, where it has not been a priority given their history.
Right.
Over the last 20, 30 years, it has not been a very progressive state or country when it comes to the environment, as Luis has said. And one of the things that they're rolling out are things that many places in the United States rolled out over 10, 15, 20 years ago. So we're hoping to be able to help them with is by being able to create a zero waste society for them, whereby none of the materials that are processed, their waste, is able to be processed and avoid landfills, which then reduces landfill gas and really creates a zero waste environment for them, which is beneficial because leaching into the soil, groundwater contamination, we had talked earlier about a wastewater treatment facility, all of these things are interconnected.
Right.
And by working together with them and seeing how we can create smaller systems that can treat their issues, I think that's a way that would be able to help them very much.
We talked about landfills, and if I recall, I thought there are quite a few that they have, and that is a common method of disposal.
They are, and based on the conversations that we had, while there are a lot of small landfills, but many of them are reaching capacity.
Right.
And so they've reached their permitted capacity, and they need help with that. Their current solution is to build bigger, larger, more, developed landfills, which what we had discussed with many of the cities is there's alternatives to that.
Right.
So rather than put waste into the ground or put organics into the ground where it's going to decompose and create methane and decomposition, we're able to then provide them the solutions to create alternative uses for that and not have to bury it in the ground, which is better for the environment.
And also take the byproduct from the process and put it back into the ground.
Correct.
And certainly
Right.
create a more fertile ground, which is something that they do need to be concerned about, because it's interesting, they have an organic farming industry.
They do, and several of the people we discussed the issues with, while they do have an organic farming industry, one of the things that became evident to us through we talked about is because of the history, because of the history that the country has had, a lot of the nutrients have been stripped from the soil.
Right.
So they look for alternative forms to do that. And one of the things that we're able to do is with the organics is to process the organic material back into a useful fertilizer that can actually be tilled right into the soil to help replenish those areas, to avoid some of the contamination and address some of those issues, to even make a more fertile soil that will enhance their crop growth.
Right, which is fabulous. And when I met Louise, the second time I came to your office, good offices, I remember you had brought a partnership together with Jeff's company, the Regreening Organics, and University of Maryland Eastern Shore, which I thought was very innovative. And
One of the things that I think that I bring to the table is connecting dots.
Right. You're very good at that. Yeah. You're great at that.
So in my travels, I meet people, and as I hear of needs, and I know that other people have solutions, I suggest that they get together and it's been fairly successful,
Right.
I think. But one of the things that Jeff talked about is something that I'm learning about waste, and that is that waste can be and should be an asset, and they're turning what we commonly term waste into an asset.
Right.
They're taking the byproducts and putting the byproducts back into the ground to regenerate, rejuvenate. I'm probably using the wrong nomenclature, but
Right.
you know, to enrich the ground again.
Right.
And it's just an interesting way of looking at waste management. I don't have a background in environmental protection,
You sound
so
good.
a lot of these concepts are
Right.
are unique. One of the things I did want to mention to your audience is that Maryland, through the Department of Natural Resources, has implemented a curriculum in our K through 12 system.
Right.
And so our students have to take part in this environment curriculum. And it's unique in the country, and Secretary Belton offered that curriculum to Serbia.
That's right. That's right.
And while we're looking at a long-term educational process, it's still something that if they implement it, they could really begin to make some changes. And of course, again, this is
Absolutely.
long-term.
Right.
But they have to start with their youth, because it's a mindset.
Absolutely. And that's what's going to drive the
Yeah.
whole agenda. It's starting at that level. And you're right. That was, remember, I heard that a number of times, and you're absolutely right. And that's why, your partnership, or potential partnership with a university, Jeff, would be invaluable to replicate in Serbia, but also to take the youth component and somehow bring that into the school systems over there, so that they could learn from that level, K through, that very early level.
So one of the things with UMES that we've been discussing with them is the collaborative relationship, and how do we create a sustainable environment for not only the university, but for the surrounding farmers and the surrounding areas, but also working directly with the students and providing them jobs and opportunities, so that after they graduate, they're able to go out and they're able to have some real-world experience. But one of the things we're doing is potentially working with all of the departments, from the agricultural department, being an agricultural school, and being able to address some of those areas, and really making a area where local farmers and local businesses can go as a resource, which I believe universities should be as a resource when they're working in some of the rural areas now. And by providing these things and providing research opportunities for the students to come up with problems or to try and solve the problems, that is one of the things that's key. And we're utilizing almost every area, every department that the college has.
That's terrific. Well, and so going back to the departments, going back to Serbia and the University of Belgrade, I was surprised to hear how they have a very strong environmental engineering school or training or program. That's what I heard. And that a number of people we met came out of that system. So they're being trained.
Yeah, but I think that there's a difference between what they're learning from an intellectual perspective,
Right.
and really
Practical,
the practical,
Right.
real world stuff that Jeff, for example, is talking about is really it's really not there. It's not been developed.
Right.
I mean, they have the potential, but it just hasn't been developed. I remember when we were talking about this partnership, this collaboration that Jeff was talking about, and we were talking about that type of collaboration to the Serbian officials. They got excited, because that's not something that
Right.
they've thought about.
Right.
It was a paradigm that they really were hungry to explore as well. So this is something else that we might be able to, help them implement. Yeah.
And I think
that's
it's
pretty
exciting.
actually.
No, it is exciting. I think this is really something that was a great, consequence of the trip.
Yeah.
And I'm whatever I can, to do to see this
Yeah.
become a reality. I think it's really important.
Another area that we looked at, they told us that that 70% of their energy is produced through coal,
Right.
and the coal there is a very low grade coal.
Right.
And so Secretary Grumbles, our Secretary of Environment, suggested that they send some of their engineers and their experts that work in that field to see what we're doing and how we're regulating, our coal industry and how we're developing the clean coal burning technologies and take a look at some of those areas
Yeah.
as well.
And again, I go back to it's a credit to your team, because I think it's important. First of all, it's important to go somewhere and to see it, to speak to people, and to fully understand it. And the fact that you all are willing to do that, and you went there and you brought companies with you.
I think we as Marylanders really need to feel a sense of pride about where we're at from this whole environmental sector's perspective. I mean, we are a national leader in this whole area, and Secretary Grumbles brings a wealth of expertise and has really led the charge in this area. And one other area, just in terms of water, for example, Governor Hogan was named as a co-chair of the National Governors Association Commission or Committee on Water.
Right.
And there's a long alphabet soup name to it, but basically it has to do with water.
Interesting.
And his co-chair is Governor Jerry Brown of California.
Oh, I think I remember. That's right.
Now, you talk about two opposite
politically. Right.
Divergent. You couldn't get these two guys to talk to each other on a political perspective, but yet this water resource is so important.
Oh my God!
The
state of California, for the
to California
and Maryland,
and Maryland, that these two governors are willing to chair this particular commission.
Is this recent?
Committee? Yeah, it's fairly recent.
Oh, that's great.
It's probably, I think they were named co-chairs within the last 4 or 5 months.
Oh, this is terrific.
So.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah, Maryland is a leader, and so I think our citizens really have something to hang their hat on and to be proud of.
Well, no, we're grateful, and I guess before we close, so Jeff, what was your biggest takeaway from the whole trip? I mean, something that really stood out.
I would say the commonalities. And I think that all of us on the delegation went there and talking on the trip there, and we had a perceived understanding of what we read about, what we see in the media as far as this is what our preconceived notions would be. And when you land in country and you're talking to them and you really see how the same things that, as I mentioned earlier, the same effects that we go through. But I think it was really the warmth that we received. Yes. We were very well received by Minister Trevon and all of his staff, and he did a phenomenal job in selecting people that are open, that are very caring. And it was, I left there with just feeling that the people that were there were just not there to do their jobs. And it was kind of like the secretaries and all of us there. We went there as companies, but I think there was a really unique bonding experience. We had time to discuss different ideas, throw ideas out there, debate ideas, if you will. But I think that it doesn't really matter whether you're in the United States or anywhere else in the world. We all have the same issues, and the warmth, again, and I can't say enough about it. It was just, we were really treated very welcomely, very warmly from everybody, and it was a truly unique experience, something that I'll remember for quite a long time.
Absolutely. Right. Well, on that great note, thank you both. It was
Thank you.
wonderful to have you.
Thank
And
you.
we'll
Thank
do it
you.
again.
Please.
We'll go back to Serbia. You've been watching The Next Word. Thank you. Have a great evening. Good night.